Hello, everyone. It's me, the world famous Settlers Lament, back here again. And thank you very much. You know, I used to say donate to Settlers Lament. Now I should say pray for Settlers Lament. I mean, donate still, of course, but also pray. That one's more important. Now, I know this might sound nice for anyone just watching this scene, seeing this guy here saying pray for Settlers Lament, but actually, this was him being mean, being part of a joke. So that's bad. That's bad, Mike, but still pray for me. But okay, I know people are complaining. Settlers Lament, why are you 11 minutes late? Don't you know how valuable my time is? Yeah, I do know how valuable your time is. It is 1/8,000th the value of my time because I have 8,000 subscribers. That means you, viewer, have the moral worth of 1/8,000th of me. Now I'm sorry if there's any major YouTubers watching. I am sorry for wasting your time, but for the plebs watching, I don't care. I'm glad I wasted your time. I should waste even more of your time. If anything, I wish I could have wasted more time. Now that said, it's not my fault that I'm late. It's actually Australian dude's fault. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Furious Pertinix. I don't know. He's like a dude that's in these circles. I think he's on AA's channel sometimes. I don't know. I don't really watch AA's channel anymore. But he's on Twitter. I don't know. He's been on here once or twice before. I think. Don't know really how to pronounce his name. But he's Australian. He was supposed to be here. He actually is part of the reason for some of the scheduling difficulties. Not really like that he personally did anything, other than just that he exists in Australia, and that makes it really difficult to schedule a stream. And so I scheduled it, in such a way that we could have both British people, Americans, and Australians all in the same stream, and then he doesn't even show up. So I would tell you to go to his channel and to complain very politely, very TOS compliantly. But he doesn't have a channel. He does, however, have his Twitter account linked. So I will encourage you to go to his Twitter account and in very polite ways go there and complain that he made Settlers Lament stream late. As we all know, I hate being late. I hate it when my stream is late. I hate wasting my subscribers' valuable time, and it's his fault that I wasted your time. So go let him know that it's his fault that we're late. Let him know that, and let him know your displeasure in very polite TOS compliant ways. So what are we going to talk about here today? Today we are here to talk about Andrew Tate. Why are we talking about Andrew Tate? Well, I don't even really know, or I didn't know who Andrew Tate was just a few months ago, which is really weird because I know all sorts of tiny micro niche right-wing e-celebs. Yet this Andrew Tate guy just exploded on the scene. I don't know, a couple months ago, last summer. I don't even really know. It's all just kind of a blur. With millions of followers, with all this stuff. He's like the most Googled man. He's famous. He's notorious. He's this based right wing. I don't know, MRA, PUA. I don't even really know. Some sort of gender thing. That the right wingers love so much, but he's sexist and evil, and I mean, it all. I joke about feds a lot, but it does seem a bit suspicious that this guy just exploded on the scene completely randomly. I'd never heard of him before. I know who most people are, especially the big name people. And then he just suddenly, I have all these people telling me, care about this, listen to this is important. But now the Andrew Tate saga, I think, has more or less run its course with him being arrested. And I've never really been that into the whole PUA, MRA circle stuff. And back in the day, I was into the Sargon anti-feminist stuff. That's not exactly the same thing. But that's somewhat similar circles, I suppose. But that's the closest I've ever been. So I was never really that interested with Andrew Tate, other than just that I was hearing about him everywhere. And now with the situation more or less being resolved, I think it's useful to do an Andrew Tate retrospective on what exactly happened, what exactly was he advocating, was he based, was he cringe, is he a proponent of the Coomer Right? All these questions and many more will be answered today. And that is why I invited on two Andrew Tate experts. Now, unfortunately, we don't have two Andrew Tate experts with us today. We have one Andrew Tate expert because one of them was Australian dude, and Australian dude isn't here. So Elliot is going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting today.
That's fine. I think the first thing that I have to say is that I completely disagree with your evaluation of Andrew Tate. To be entirely honest with you, first of all, he's been around for years. I think he was with Michaela Peterson for a bit, even. Right? That's the first thing. The second thing is that you think that he's going to end with prison? No. This will make him even bigger. This will make him even more important. Now, he's obviously a very significant figure. Like everyone, I mean, I've been to train stations in major cities in the UK and seen his face plastered on Sky News. The guy is very, very famous right now and very, very influential. And he did have influence before, but of course he's exploded onto the scene. Now, we'll talk about what he's actually taught in a bit, because I actually went through some of his stuff. But to say that this is over, I think is a very big mistake. My own brother, my own little brother, who's kind of he's getting less normie, but he's kind of like a normie, right? He thinks that he's gonna wind up committing suicide in prison with 15 bullets to the back of his head, right? Which will put an end to him, but it certainly won't put an end to the movement that he's head of. It will just radicalize it. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, but I think he's going to come out of prison, but more popular. And there's a good chance that there'll be a religious conversion in that man. And I'll get on to why I think so in a second when I talk about his previous teaching. But I think that there's way more petrol left in the tank, so to speak, with Andrew Tate. I don't think we've heard the last of him.
I mean that very much is possible. I mean, like I said, I'm no Andrew Tate expert. You are my Andrew Tate expert, so I'm sure you're probably right and I'm wrong. But that's it. I mean, to be clear, I'm not literally saying that like he's a fed plant. I'm just saying like when these people explode, it sort of gives me the vibe that like this is desired by certain people.
No, I mean I think it is, but the way that they're going about it is kind of strange. So, for example, he was on Piers Morgan, who I understand isn't so mainstream as he once was, but Piers Morgan allows him to play chess with him, and then and of course, because Andrew Tate's dad is a grandmaster, he completely flattens Piers Morgan. I think either there's something going on here, which it could be, or it's just that they don't really know how to deal with him, because he's the reason why Andrew Tate is so compelling to so many young men is because on the basic kind of lizard brain level, he's telling a lot more truth about reality than the schools are. And he's selling a kind of... Sorry, go ahead.
I wanted to chime in here also on the whole fame thing. Also, before that, Lament, I'm deeply hurt that you said that this stream should accommodate British, American, and Australian people, and lumped me with the British with that. But anyways, on the whole fame thing.
Well, I mean, Germany should be a British colony, so
it was for a few years.
True. My part of Germany, actually, the city I grew up in, had a British school up until 8 years ago. But and like British occupation, like I was in a British occupied zone basically. But getting back on topic, I have a guy who kind of like keeps up with like these various online personas for me and like keeps me updated on them from while to while. And he pointed out to me, he said,
"Okay, well, wait a minute. I don't even have a minion that does that. This is not fair. So someone needs to become my e-celeb minion. Okay, I'm hiring for e-celeb tracker keeper minions.
Well, in the pre-show, you kind of like saw how sometimes well, I won't say, but how I sometimes don't pay attention when I also relate what that guy told me about one of the people on stream here, and said that I basically had forgotten everything. But going back to Andrew Tate, he told me something to keep in mind with Tate is that back in, let's say, 2018, 2019, a lot of us actually shared him around without really knowing who that guy is. You guys may remember these clips people shared around that time. Also around the 2020s, bit earlier. And there were these clips of a guy who was on these podcasts, and it was really interesting that it was shared around in right-wing circuits because it was oriented around rappers, around like more like Afro-American and Latino culture and stuff like that. And the people on there were also like mestizo looking, Afro-American looking. So Andrew Tate kind of fit in there because he also has like a darker hue, right? And
It's half
he
and
sits,
half.
yeah, something like that. I don't know, like, but whatever. Like he sits in there and he does these clips, and they circulate all throughout the right wing as well, of saying to a woman, like always discussing with women, that, like this podcast, which I have forgotten what it is, but like what the name is or anything. But they would very often get like young guys, young women, like in their 20s on, and they basically discuss about relationships and what they think of in relationships. And Tate would be on there, and he would talk talk to the women, and he would basically like BTFO them. And there's like these clips of him saying, like, oh, so you expect a man to do this, to do this, to do this, like provide the house, provide the car, provide the whatever, but then you don't put up anything into the relationship. Those are all Andrew Tate clips. Like if you remember these clips where like a guy sits in these boardrooms and there's like these like let's just call them Shaniquas, like women who are like, they look like, you know, non-white party girls, if you guys know the type, like girls who like non-whites who hang around in the rap scene, basically, is the best I can describe them. And he basically goes
I mean, no, I am not. I'm not really familiar with these clips. I mean, I think I vaguely have seen one or two of them since the whole Andrew Tate stuff blew up a few months ago, but I do not remember seeing this in the past couple of years when these were originally circulating, apparently.
Oh, I mean, I found it interesting back in the day. That's actually why my friend got me reminded me of them. It's in kind of like this idea of, oh, he actually was around, but he just wasn't around in our circles, right? And that is, I think, something that is why like it would almost be the hubris of the right wing, where it's kind of like, oh, this guy like vaguely has our talking points, and just laughing at the comment on screen, becoming a celebrity tracking minion, increase your word from 1/8,000 to 1/6,000. Nice.
I think
Anyway,
about like Andrew Tate, you have to understand the way that intelligence agencies recruit people. You know, he got to start. He was like the 7th largest kickboxer in the world. His father had ties to, I think, a certain intelligence agency from the Middle East, and he was a traveling chess player. Like, come on, really? Andrew Tate's dad traveled and played chess as like a profession. I know people do that, but it seems like a really good cover for some sort of spook. So I think that the theory that this guy is an agent of some kind, either Russian or Israeli, makes a lot of sense. And it's, you know, there's like a lot of truth to it. And of course, you know, he'd get to a point of public persona, 7th best kickboxer in the world or whatever. And then he would make his transition to the mainstream medium when he gets recruited in his own form, and then they utilize him in whatever way they can. That's what I think. That's like my conspiratorial side. Realistically, what actually happened probably is that he got into it, and he understood that he can't be a kickboxer forever, or else he'll lose his brain. And so he started trying to find alternative ways to make money, and pimping women was one of them. And from there, he wanted to teach other people. He wanted to get on the grift of the self-help guru kind of stuff online, and he started doing that.
Yeah, I think the like Andrew Tate is an intelligence asset thing. I think you won't get far with that, because the question, of course, is like, what is the op, right? Like, where is he gathering intelligence? Is he like, I mean, if the CIA wants to influence people, they just ring like Hollywood, right? They don't. I mean, they probably like have started getting into the influencer game, but I just don't see this as like the CIA doing it, and I especially don't see it as Mossad doing it. Like, if Mossad was doing it, he would be way more on about like, we need to give money to Israel or something, like, or like, we need to protect the greatest ally in the Middle East or something like that. I don't see him as an op, because he is not geopolitically relevant, and culturally too. Like, there's no intelligence agency I would be aware of to which I would ascribe enough, let's say, cultural finesse that it has an interest in the current what Andrew Tate is about, right? In the current gender relations in the West, right? Like, regardless of what you think about Andrew Tate's teachings there, which of course
I don't think
But
I think the idea of thinking he's a Fed is ridiculous.
Well, I think the idea of thinking anybody is a Fed is ridiculous until it's not. The Andrew Tate is a Fed. It's an op. It's not an intelligence gathering. Well, it could be. It's important to influence the people that influence people. Andrew Tate is friends with some of the largest like streamers and podcasters in the manosphere in this sector of the internet that we are not very familiar with. The No Jumper guys, the Fresh and Fit guys.
I am. I was
okay. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. When I say we,
Yeah.
I mean like the right wing guys. We
Yeah.
don't overlap a lot. I imagine.
I was. Yeah.
But my
he's not
point
influencing
is,
them in any way.
he's not but I mean, if he has him over to his place in Romania and he goes over there, I mean, there are
He's not
there
influencing
are
them
means.
intellectually. He's just repeating their ideas. Like
Well,
there's not much new in it.
that only actually kind of furthers my point, right? He doesn't have to influence them intellectually to get them in compromising situations. He just has to be around them long enough. So there's that. I mean, or it's basically just a way to establish some form of connection. If you don't think there's reason for intelligence agencies to get into the spotlight and destabilize things, then I think that's China's whole MO for the past 20 years. I think that there would be countless other agencies interested in doing that. And I just looked it up. Apparently, Andrew Tate said his dad was in the CIA.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, but so the thing is.
So okay. I feel like we've gotten a bit ahead of ourselves. I think it might be useful to give the audience and myself honestly, because I don't understand the Tate situation incredibly well either. A bit of a background on like who exactly Andrew Tate is and like what exactly his beliefs are. I know we've talked about that a bit, but I think Elliot, if you could explain like what exactly is he a proponent of a bit more specifically.
Okay, so this is Andrew Tate as it stands, right? So Dad was an American soldier. Some people have claimed he was in the CIA. You know, the extent that I know of him is that he's a grandmaster at chess, and that he married an English woman. They divorced when he was very young, and I believe he initially grew up in the US, and then he grew up for his teenage years in Luton, which is, for those who aren't in the UK, quite a rough city. It's comparable, maybe not Detroit, maybe not as intense as Detroit or Philadelphia or something like that, but it's quite an intense city. It's not a nice place to be. So he grew up seemingly in council estate culture. It's kind of weird because he has this strange accent where he mixes in like very distinctly English English slang. So he'll call himself a G. That's a very English thing to do, right? That's one thing. Now, after that, he got involved in kickboxing. He got really, really good at it. He wasn't very rich with it. He owned like a small flat in London, and London is very expensive. It's like New York. It's very, very expensive. And eventually he gets to a point where he's like, I need to, I can make money with his girlfriends. And so what he does is he asks his girlfriends to meet him. And he says, okay, we're going to start a cam girl business. Which is, I don't think I need to tell you. And then he just builds this up over the time, and this ends up making a huge amount of money. Eventually he ends up in Romania and ends up making a lot of money cooperating with the Romanian mafia in running casinos. So he ran a lot of casinos in Romania. Now that's the basics I know of his history. He was originally an atheist. Like he says in one of his podcasts, he's an atheist. But he's obviously recently converted to Islam, which I think is something that could be very interesting as time goes forward. But his basic ideas are they're like bear in mind, he's probably the smartest person I'm aware of in the whole of the PUA sphere. There are a lot of sharp guys in that sphere, but he's probably the sharpest. He's very bright. And he claims not to have read books, but he clearly knows the spheres very well because he repeats a lot of the advice that's in a lot of the more prominent books there. And he takes the business hustle side. So for those who don't know, there's the manosphere. There's a sort of a mixing point between pickup artist culture and getting carnal pleasure, or really the pride of getting so many women on one side. So there's the PUA culture, and then there's hustle culture. And hustle culture is around making money, right? And these tend to mix, and he mixed them incredibly well. He was able to provide a a superior, a marginally superior, but still a superior level of advice in comparison to his competitors, from what I remember, right? Bear in mind, I haven't really been in communication with these circles for a couple of years, but going over what he said, he was offering superior advice. That's why I think that could have contributed to his success. So his view is kind of a view of it's basically acquiring power, right? He says at one point that he doesn't care so much about the women. Like, he'll often hold up the women and the money as something that's worth pursuing, but he'll say he'd rather be with his father. And he also makes another point, this weird comment about how he really enjoys the feeling of like weaker men are sort of withering away under his gaze, right? So there's something, I think he's driven mostly by power, the guy, right? So that's probably where he was before. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes more Islamic, because he's been tweeting out funny things, for like quotes from the Quran concerning his imprisonment. So I would say my evaluation of the guy, based on my limited looking into him, is that he's effectively just a brighter PUA, and he pursues the exact same things as them. I don't see the necessity of at least Western intelligence agencies being involved, because all he's done is destabilize the civil religion of the West, right? I could see China, maybe Russia. I'm not sure I'd say the Russians would, but the Chinese might, because they put TikTok down, right?
No, the Chinese don't operate like that. I can give you that on decent enough authority.
Yeah, it's just,
really interesting. I'm interested in that, to sidetrack things. Why? What? The Chinese don't operate in a culturally destabilizing manner? How do they operate?
So as someone who might or might not have been contacted by very, let's say, very interesting contacts out of Beijing in an attempt to set up connections in the German business world.
Okay, this is really unfair. Why do I never get offers to be a spy? Why is it always everyone else? This is so unfair.
It was a very weird situation. So basically, I was doing sales. I was at uni. My uni. So I guess you guys don't know, but in China, like, they send their kids to Europe. Like, if their kids aren't smart, they send their kids to European, like, elite unis where you can like pay for the grades and everything, right? And so we have a lot of Chinese people over, but then sometimes we also have Chinese people who kind of like, let's say, earn their spoils. And we had a guy over. And I kind of struck friends with him because I spoke a bit of Chinese, and I know a bit of Chinese culture. I had these influences before that. I actually worked in another very shady, but not in that way shady, like Chinese. It was like very close to an MLM business run out of Germany. So I had like kind of like these connections to Chinese culture, and I talked to him, and I was doing sales at the time. And he kind of like wanted to recruit me into doing what effectively he said, like, so he had a company, right? And his company was a robotics company, basically propped up by the CCP, right? And it's like all the things, like their product had shook hands with Merkel at the time and everything, right? But it's like, it's very obviously that he, and in the way he spoke about these things, that the company really was just a project of the CCP. And he was also sponsored by his uni, which again was an outlet of the CCP. And he wanted to get me, because we were friends and I was doing sales at the time. And he was like, okay, can you do phone calls and everything? So at our uni, what we do, which is not that uncommon for German private unis, is we set up our own events where we kind of like get our own sponsors in, and we do the phone calls for that and everything. So I was engaged in the organization of an event on which we kind of like talked through that, and to which I was also partially, though not as much, engaged in calling up businesses to sponsor the event, right? So he was like, can you kind of call up businesses and do this thing where in China, we really like how the German university system works, and like how the Germans do manufacturing. And we want to kind of like get connections there, and kind of like have talks and want to visit things. And it became clearer and clearer and clearer as he started offering me things. There was basically corporate espionage, right? And so the thing with the Chinese is the Chinese believe themselves culturally they have kind of like done away with the culture thing. They have a very their own very much culture war. They actually had like a fight over masculinity in China, and technically still have it. Maybe, I don't know. I've largely like lost all those contacts when I went out of uni. But anyways, their conception of Western culture is very superficial, and they don't care about it. Simply because they also don't care about culture in their own country as well. Because since the Cultural Revolution, culture has kind of become like a backdrop. It's just now coming back, but more in a fetishized form, where you kind of like the rat trad movement, but for Chinese, where they wear like Chinese clothing from like the 15th century or something, or even older, like things from what would technically be the Bronze Age or something, or like very early China. So there's like no real like existing Chinese culture, and they're not very aware of the idea of a culture war even going on in the West, right? So I like everything I saw, every contact I had, also with other people like at the uni, there were some like people who were like very deep into the Chinese power system, because again, it's basically like the rich kids from China who don't get a university degree there because it's very competitive, but who still definitely need to have been on an elite university. They get shipped over, so you get a lot of interesting talks. And some of them, they're just like, yeah, my dad owns a bank, and I know like everybody in the CCP up until like 2 levels below Xi Jinping, right? And I just don't see like, I mean, of course, I don't have like all the insights into the operations of the Chinese intelligence services, but everything like I saw, all the impressions I get is they care about technology, and they care about basically like structures they can import into China, and they have no conception of culture at all. Like the idea of like what constitutes philosophy is very, very also bare bones in China.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I've just like fallen for like some like right-wing internet meme or something like that. But like, isn't TikTok controlled by the Chinese, and like hasn't the government like explicitly admitted this and considered banning it for that reason?
Yes, it is controlled by the Chinese, but the idea that the Chinese use TikTok in China to, let's say, like make the Chinese stronger and use it in America to let the Americans decay is false. The faction around TikTok is basically like the Chinese version of, let's say, like Elon Musk, but without like the recent history of Elon Musk, where he becomes more, let's say, sophisticated, but like more like old libertarian Elon Musk, right? And like these people don't have like any conception. Like the people who are pushing for the restrictions on TikTok in China and for these, let's say, Chinese culture and decency things, they are largely a very different faction than the, let's say, the technology guys. I mean, for example, recently or just coming out, you can actually watch it on YouTube. It's not bad. The first few episodes. The three body problem is a huge thing in China. You probably have heard, like somebody has probably recommended it to you as one book at some point. The book is being pushed everywhere. Oh yeah, that's something the Chinese actually do. They kind of buy into they kind of try to influence things like like newspapers and review, like these review links, ranking lists, stuff like that. But again, that's more the superficial thing. Like they more try to influence the things that boomers read rather than something like well, TikTok is a bad example, but something like YouTube, right? So the three body problem is a sci-fi book, and if you read it and if you kind of read through it, it can be seen as very, very critical of the Chinese Communist project. Okay, so especially in the beginning, because like the first conflict that arises is basically that humanity is close to extinction because a woman who was so hurt by the communist revolution basically like contacted an alien species to wipe out all of humanity, to say basically like humans can't reign over themselves, you guys need to do it. And it is very very popular in these like Shanghai adjacent technocratic circles, because they are like the book is mostly about physics and speculative sci-fi and stuff like that, and it's not really about the other stuff so much, right? It's not really about what let's say the Chinese like the Xi Jinping adjacent faction would care about, which would be again more like the nationalist side, highlighting the Chinese exceptionalism and so on and so forth. Even going back, like slowly rolling back like certain aspects of Chinese culture of being the Middle Kingdom, stuff like that. So the people who own TikTok, they're a bit like that. They don't really have so much an idea of like decency, and they really don't care for the United States. So they might manipulate TikTok in ways where it's like, again, in accordance with, let's say, the geostrategic goals of China, of saying, you know, I don't know, like push down stuff that promotes Taiwan or something. I could see that. But other than that, except for maybe some Chinese like office in the I don't even know what the intelligence service getting is called, but maybe getting in like push more like girls in flimsy dresses, because the Chinese know that takes like a lot of like that, of course, like ruins the younger generations, the younger men, because they have huge problems with that themselves, right, with streamers. Other than that, I don't really see like the idea that China is really trying to manipulate TikTok in such a way. And the reason, just to clarify that, why the United States wanted TikTok to get out of China is because, of course, regardless of how much the TikTok algorithm is manipulated, the thing the United States is much more contentious about is that all the data of TikTok flows into Beijing, right? Or the revenue of TikTok flows into Beijing, so on and so forth. So that is more what the Americans are concerned about, as far as I understand it, and not so much that the Chinese are like very good at using TikTok for like social manipulation by promoting certain things and depromoting other things. Like there's nothing I really see there. And again, like going back to Andrew Tate, who's like the real focus of this, he really doesn't strike me as a Chinese op, also because there's like no connection to Chinese money there, right? And that would be like, there would need to be some Chinese investor somewhere in the ranks. Like there would be some deal that we would be able to see, something like that. A lot of the things that people don't understand about the working of the intelligence services is it's very often way less sophisticated than people think. For example, if you think about Jeffrey Epstein, like people were onto that guy years before his first arrest, basically. So like there's like, I remember like people in these spheres. I mean, I guess I wasn't there in these spheres before the first arrest, but before the second arrest, like there were like all the flight logs of the Lolita Express and everything. All of that was known. All of that was being circulated. So
yeah,
like,
I remember with Epstein. I mean, it's not like that was anything that I followed that frequently, but I remember just like seeing random podcasts talking about it many years before it blew up and became public knowledge, like, you know, something that was very well known.
yeah,
And I mean, you know, I it's not something that I didn't look into it that much, so I was, you know, I always had a certain degree of reserve about it, that, you know, perhaps this is just like crazy, wacky conspiracy stuff. But you know, it all, I mean, it is all just what ended up becoming publicly accepted as true. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely true in that case, that that this was just like public knowledge for years, and no one did anything about it.
So yeah, that's that much I would say. Like the other thing I want to say on let's say Andrew Tate's history is, I think people often underestimate, like if you're born into certain circles, you getting successful is almost guaranteed, right? Like if your parents, for example, have just certain connections, they just can get you like into certain spheres and everything, right?
You're like, yeah, like if your dad worked for the CIA.
Yeah, but it needn't be the CIA, right? That's the thing I want to stress, right? I mean, it could be the CIA, but even then, I would actually say that like being born into the intelligence services is something that doesn't really like give you as much as a chance as being born just to a father who, again, for example, is a pro chess player, or is a pro in other things, because usually, let's say these, especially in the back in the day when society was less diffused than it is nowadays, people who are good at something would kind of like congregate into their own more and more separating sphere of just connections. So you would always have access to someone else to help you out and so on and so forth. And it's very easy to get ahead, right? Like the reason why, for example, the big scientists are the big scientists is not because they're good. It's usually because they were born into certain circuits. It's all about whom you know, and it's all about the connections you're born into. Not just just thinking about it, way more true in China than it's in Europe or the United States, but still here, like to a similar degree. And so I find it entirely plausible that if his father was already a person who was of some note, that Andrew Tate found it very, very easy to build up an online persona that would become bigger and bigger and bigger.
That's fair. I mean, again, like I said, it's I don't really suspect Tate specifically of being like literally an FBI agent or whatever.
That's domestic. He would be CIA, you know.
No, it's not that I like literally think that he's an asset. I mean, I know that's possible, but I would need some degree of hard proof to make an accusation like that. It's just that I generally suspect with stuff like this, when someone blows up, it's because it's more just that they're controlled opposition, not in the sense of that like they literally conceive of themselves as controlled opposition, but just in the sense that this is the conversation that people with power want you to be having.
I mean, come on, fellas. Like, yeah, to add on to that, like, I don't think it's rocket science, guys. We live in a society full of sinners. We live in a society that's particularly attracted to the kinds of sins that he's promoting. Is it any bloody wonder that with a distinct accent and an aggressive personality like his, that he's successful? I don't think there needs to be any sort of references to like him being some sort of CIA plant. I think what he's selling is sufficient.
Well, you never know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. But I mean, like this stuff doesn't just happen. Like sexual liberalization has always been a very intentional scheme. It's always been something that's been pushed by elites. It's not just that people just wanted to coom so badly that the desire of cooming overcame the church authorities. That's like the ridiculous liberal narrative.
I mean, you would say that you'd think that, but even in times like the 9th century, like before the Norman conquests, there were problems, or at least around those times, there were problems where they couldn't find virgin women before they got married, right?
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm not. So yeah, I know. There's like a ridiculous trad narrative that, like, I don't know, before Vatican II or before like the 1900s or before whatever, like every woman was like was perfectly chaste, and that like we didn't have problems with sexual morality. I'm not saying that sexual liberalization.
Look, I know a lot of people who never had sex before they became a Catholic. So.
Sexual liberalization is it's not just people doing sexually immoral things. Sexual liberalization is a political program. It's not just it's not identical with people doing immoral things. People have always done lots of immoral things. What I'm saying is the political program through which this stuff has been normalized and promoted is not something that was just the result of like an overpowering desire of the demos to break down conventional social norms.
The demos has always been driven by its passions.
Yeah, I mean that's true, but I don't think that's that's true, but I don't think that's relevant. I just think is.
Anyway.
Yeah, I mean this is for another stream. I would like to challenge that narrative at some point, but that's for another stream, I think.
Okay. So hello, furious heretics. I don't know. I don't speak Latin. Australian dude. Hello.
No, all good, Mr. Settler. Indeed, thank you. Hello, gentlemen on the panel, and sorry, chat. I got my wires crossed for my start time, so I'm a little bit late. So thank you for tolerating my tardiness.
No worries.
But if I can just reply to just what you guys have covered the last sort of 5 or so minutes, I think I sort of hear similar things about personalities have popped up recently. You know, I think we sort of all have memories long enough that go back to, say, Jordan Peterson and the whole perfect storm situation that brought him to light. And I've heard other people sort of come to the conclusion of, oh, how did Lex Friedman sort of come out of nowhere and become big, you know, on Twitter and YouTube, etc., when he has the personality, you know, of a wet rag? And I think sometimes with Tate, he's obviously like a very different personality to Friedman. He actually has presence and he has charisma, and it's not easy to actually appear to be a high masculine individual in a feminized society, such as the case with Tate. And so I've just seen someone in the chat reference this too, and I tend to agree that it's a bit of a perfect storm scenario where the social cultural zeitgeist plus Tate's personality plus the political and social conversations of today somehow playing to him being large, and he's just sort of hooked into that you know, algorithmic sort of essence of YouTube or Twitter, and you know, he puts out a few words and already had enough of a following to sort of snowball himself into prominence. But yeah, I sort of, you know, largely agree that from what I just read on the chat here to sort of catch up, that yeah, he's obviously sort of quite unsavory, but I don't think he was a nothing person. I mean, he obviously has a background in martial arts and, you know, kickboxing or whatever it is that he does. But yeah, there's sort of, even for me, like having obviously just done a little bit of preparation for the stream, there's definitely some more unsavory undertones to his past than I think most people even realized, myself included.
Yeah, I think something I want to like push back on and simultaneously agree on is the idea of Andrew Tate kind of symbolizing masculinity in a feminized society. This is something Elliot and I discussed on a stream I did last week with him, where I kind of like did a review basically of let's say my right-wing journey, the general like past of the West, and then what I see as like worthwhile going forward and everything. And in that stream, I very much kind of talk about the theme of the loss of femininity in Western society, which we can trace back for a very long time, depending on how edgy we want to be, how much we want to bully David. We could even trace it back to Luther himself. But we can also trace it back to other points, and definitely has been intensifying in many ways. And in that, Elliot also mentioned something else, which in that stream I just kind of hand wave away because I was tired and I wanted to get through it. But which definitely was a good point is that we've also lost masculinity as well. And I would say kind of in reaction to that. And so what Andrew Tate provides to people is really just, let's say, the idea of performative, of dreamt masculinity, because in a society that doesn't actually understand masculinity correctly and has no reference to masculinity anymore, somebody like Andrew Tate comes across as very, let's say, as someone who aligns with the masculine instinct, because on the one hand, the masculine instinct kind of has this idea of I want women, I want status. This is something most people don't know about testosterone, actually. Testosterone is the keep status structures stable and well organized, like chemical in the body, basically. Testosterone
The
is
German
about
drug.
status. Huh?
The German
What?
drug, keep everything running properly in good order.
Yeah, we could probably do studies and stuff like that.
Just on that basis, ST, I just
Yeah.
want to say, like, I actually essentially agree with you.
Yeah,
I didn't elaborate on this per se, but I think Tate is sort of a hollow representation of like a performative testosterone rather than the man himself representing an essential or quintessential being a quintessential exemplar of masculinity. I think those two things, you know, I think we agree, certainly. I just didn't expand upon that point, but I certainly agree with what you're saying now.
Yeah. I thought so as well. I just wanted to spell it out. And I definitely want to spell it out also because the other thing about this performative masculinity is that every boy who has these desires, and believe me, I know I was one, and I think many of the people here on stream and many of the people here in the comment section were one, are one. It's okay. It's like, it's part of growing up.
It's not okay, but it's expected.
It's true. It's very true, especially with the point I just want to get into. It's okay to accept it. That is what I want. That is what I meant. It's okay to accept that you currently have have this desire of just, I want hot babes and I want money and status and power. And David's like, yeah. But the thing is that each one of us knows that is not the end thing, right? Like everyone, like we want that, but then we also know that's not really the goal, And Andrew Tate is perfect on that, because on the one hand he kind of like he displays that, but then he's always like, oh, that's not actually the thing, It's like, oh, the man who's happiest is the man who prays. It's like, oh, I have like 20 Lamborghinis, but I don't care about the 20 Lamborghinis, What was the other guy? What's his name? Here in my garage. The thing I really value is knowledge. What's his name? Like, it's also one of
Yeah, the guy I thought I got spammed
Ty
by his
Lopez.
YouTube ads.
Ty Lopez. Yeah.
Oh,
It's the same
Lopez.
thing. It's the same thing, right? Like the humble brag, basically, right? It's like,
Was
I
that
really
guy a
care about
PUA?
knowledge.
I mean, I never really saw anything from him other than the YouTube ads.
No, I think he was really just like a knowledge hustle kind of guy, hustle culture, make money.
Yeah.
More than really
Yeah.
like pick up artistry, I think.
No.
Am I right about that, Elliot?
Sorry, I was sorry. What did you say? I was kind of off on my own thoughts.
Talking about Ty Lopez. Was he pickup artist or like just hustle? Like
He
business
was,
scam?
as far as I know, he was just hustle, but I don't remember him that much. Like he was just he wasn't someone I paid much attention to.
New.
Yeah, but the thing I want to come across is that is really the grift, right? The real grift is kind of like to flaunt your masculinity. Other people are like very prominent in the kind of like manosphere world. They're a lot like that. For example, Rollo Tomasi, right? He is kind of like, like you're like, it's definitely fine to have like the end goal that you're married, and I can give you advice for that. And
He's
then
a complete-
what?
No,
Huh?
he wasn't. Wait. He was the guy that was saying, like, you're being cringe if you find a woman through the PUA techniques and then settle down with her. You need to have multiple women at once. The man was like,
Exactly.
complete-
Exactly. And
Oh,
that's
I thought
the
you were
point,
saying
right?
that he was settling down. Okay, I thought you were saying he was like
No, that's
advocating
the
settling
point, right?
down.
He goes like,
Yeah.
it's okay to be married, but I need to teach you how to do it, right? It's like
I don't think
like,
he'd say that. I think he'd say like you're being cringe. I think that's what he's.
No, he
basically-
like.
at least
I
in
mean,
National
he's
Man Volume
married
1,
himself, right? In his books, he talks about his marriage, right? And he talks about like real marriage looks like this and like this and like this. And the point where he poisons the well is, again, he says, "Oh, if you actually want to have a good marriage, you first need to have had sex with many women, so you can kind of like you're at an advantage, you're in the longer lever, like you're like." And that is basically how he poisons the well, right? Like every young boy who gets into these things, they're always like, well, what I really want to do, right? When I had a PUA phase, getting into getting into this stuff and reading into this kind of stuff and stuff like that and trying it out. Again, it wasn't my uni phase. You kind of guys kind of start seeing how like uni ST comes together with these like various escapades, but kind of like trying to game girls at parties and stuff like that. And I one of the things that never made me go through with it was that I am from a broken relationship and I didn't want that for myself, and I knew that like if I just game this girl at this party here, like nothing is coming out of that. So there was always kind of like this disconnect within me, where on the one hand I kind of wanted to be a stud or whatever, but on the other hand I also was kind of like, well, this is not going anywhere, right? Like,
Can you do me a
she's
favor?
not going to become my wife. What?
That Arnold Schwarzenegger quote, one where he says, "I want to be I'm ballsy. I'm a stud." Have you ever seen that?
Yes.
You have a German accent. You should just do
Oh
that.
no,
Is that the
I
one
can't
with
pull up
smoking the cigar?
Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, the one where
It's like
I'm
he's like,
ballsy.
"Ah,
I
I'm
smoke.
I'm going to smoke this cigar because I'm ballsy.
Yeah.
Sorry, ST.
You
No,
saying
I-
stud made me think of that for some reason.
Yeah, no, I can see that. But the thing is he actually has a very rural Austrian accent, and I speak High German, so my accent is actually very different. So if I try
Good for
to
you.
mime him, it doesn't sound like him at all. I would say, "I'm ballsy. I'm a stud." Like that's the closest I can get. I'm sorry.
Andrew Tate.
Yeah. No, but what was the point I was trying to make? Again, like this idea that there's something more there, and that you can kind of like have all of this, like get into this world and then get this status, but then not act upon it. But you're still like you have the Lamborghinis, but you're not actually like greedy. Like you have the attention of all the women, and you could get any girl into bed basically, but you actually settle down for the best one and stuff like that. And I think that is also, let's say, the allure and also the danger of people like Andrew Tate. If we want to talk about like the toxic side of his influence on people, is that everybody kind of thinks that way. Everybody kind of thinks, well, I'm playing the game in the right way. You know, I'm the good boy. But then they still take on cringe advice. And the real problem is that, again, the manosphere mostly is a well poisoning operation. Like the data they share around, most of it is fake. Like the ideas about men and women they share around, most of it is fake. And like the reason why it works for them and is very different from what they say about it. And the best person I always like, the thing that actually got me out of the manosphere thing is I kind of like started like making friends with other people who were into like POA stuff. And one of them said, you need to read Neil Strauss's The Game. So I was like, okay, this is like the next level. I'm reading Neil Strauss' The Game. And The Game is actually a book I recommend to everybody to this day, because when I read it, I was like, wait, so pickup is just going to ruin your life? Because it really outlines the relationship of Strauss, who goes by the name of, I don't even know what he went by. Style. He goes by the pickup name Style.
I'm gonna play the role of Sedler and try to get us
Yeah.
back on track. I'm not sure I'm following with the Andrew Tate lore here. Is this the context to the pickup artist community? I mean,
yeah, it is context. I think this is the core of, like, this is when pickup was born. Was born with the guy who went by the pickup name of Mystery. You can still looking up like mystery pickup artist, like a very Johnny Depp looking weird guy. And his like main acolyte is a guy who went by Style at the time. And he actually kind of looks a bit like Andrew Tate, which is funny. And anyways, the game is about kind of like their life as pickup artists. And one of the things it highlights is that Mystery is able to game all of these women. But then there's this one party girl which he actually falls in love with. And she destroys him, like she ruins him emotionally, she ruins him emotionally. And not even because she kind of like tries to ruin his life or because he's a terrible person, but because the skill set that he kind of like learned for himself, Style comes out of Mystery comes out of, he was a children's party magician before he became a pickup artist. The world he comes out of is only ever this kind of like performative thing, this kind of like getting women into bed thing. And he is just intrinsically like emotionally incapable of having a real human relationship with a woman. He can have like a friendship with a man, but he cannot have a real relationship with a woman. And this is actually the topic I want to kind of pick upon with the pickup artists and with Andrew Tate and with the entire situation around this and what people are saying with kind of like the perfect storm that is going around that. And that is the idea of anima possession, which again, I discussed with Elliot in the stream last week, and is a topic that I will kind of go into much deeper in my channel kind of as we go along. But basically the idea is that this is from Jungian psychology. Jungian psychology, of course, inspired by things like alchemy, hermeticism, stuff like that. And I don't know, I'm sorry, I'm probably taking up too much time. I will give up the mic after this. Let me just drop this and be done. And basically the idea is that every man with him has the anima, which is the female element which he desires, mainly inspired by his mother, so mainly influenced by his mother, we could say, maybe colored by his mother, maybe. It is basically the perfect woman which people chase after, and which in her, let's say, more abstract sense is what animates the man. So the anima is as it kind of like extends itself, can also become a project, or for example, like an architectural project of building a house or something. It's the female receptive to the man in which he becomes real. And a good example, for example, from mythology, which is, well, it's badly phrased, but it's easily understood, is Enkidu, who has 2 weeks of continual intercourse with a temple prostitute. And before that, he is a beast man. And after that, he's a sophisticated man who can talk with the demigods, right? And that is kind of the idea of what Carl Jung calls individuation. And so to this process of individuation, which is kind of the process towards, let's say, the preparing for what we in Christianity would call theosis or apotheosis, kind of like the state at which we are able to engage Christ on such a level that we can take him in properly, is the stage of kind of making ourselves psychologically prepared for the world. Again, that is individuation. And for that stage, the interaction and the overcoming and the integration of the anima is a necessary stage. And this is something we've lost in the West. So what Jung talks about a lot is anima possession with men. And that is basically the idea is that any man you have in your life who like behaves intrinsically different between the women when he's around women or when he's around men, right? That's kind of like the most simple sign of anima possession, because always just the presence and the existence of women intrinsically changes their behavior, right? And some people become like Andrew Tate. They become like very, like domineering, right? And Andrew Tate is a perfect example for an anima possessed person, because he takes his anima, right, and he makes her really into his fuel, but in that he kind of tries to control her, like he tries to control the women in his life, like how he pimps them out. And that is why he rules over this sort of animation within him. This is the whole like, I'm ballsy, I'm a stud, I'm always active, always on. This is something that kind of binds all these psychologies together, which is also why women warn each other about people who like listen to Joe Rogan and are like into like taking cold showers, being dude bros and everything. Because most of these men end up incredibly controlling because they control their own anima, right? They set a desire to be able to control that which animates them, that which moves them, which means that they psychologically, because the brain links these things together, they also start controlling their girlfriends. And in Andrew Tate's case, he controls them so much that he again turns them into prostitutes, right? Which is kind of like an almost perfection of that. And then the other side of anima possession would be, and with that I will leave it and give up the floor to somebody else. The other side of anima possession would be something like simping, right? Which most people are kind of driven away from and are driven into the Andrew Tate thing from that kind of like, you don't want to be a simp, you don't want to be that. And that's kind of like, we could almost say kind of like the left-wing version of anima possession. And that, of course, is where you hold the anima as something divine and distant, where basically your own action is something you're forbidden to do. You're not able to act, right? Others need to act for you because the anima, the activating component, the thing in which you become man is so distant from you that you can only ever revere it, but never interact or engage with it. And that would be the case, for example, with a man also with a streamer, right? Where he gives her money and he's like, oh, you live this perfect life and you need this money and I need to give it to you. But I don't like expect anything in return because the only thing is basically that you're perfect, right? Or they kind of like sit there and then it's like, hopefully she'll notice me or something, or this might happen, but it's always her prerogative to make it happen. And he will never go there. He will never actually be himself animated to pursue her, right? He will always kind of like just surrender his agency to hers. And with that, I will leave the floor to other people.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned prostitution because I think, as far as we know, he wasn't actually giving out prostitutes, but I think this adds a little wrinkle to the discussion if I go into detail with what he said about his cam girl stuff. So,
well, I mean, like cam girls are prostitutes. Like they are.
Well, but like, hear me out, right? He makes it a very strong point that nobody except for him or maybe his brother actually engage in that with his women, and he's really, really, really insistent on this, right?
No, I mean, I am
very much so.
So okay, I mean, obviously, there's a physical difference between like prostitutes that have sex with men as a part of their prostitution and prostitutes who get naked and post images or like videotape themselves, but both are prostitution.
No, but like if you let me finish, it seems like he's preying on men who are emotionally vulnerable rather than ones who simply want to coom. That's the point I was going to make.
Yeah.
There seems to be kind of a double tier of predation going on, which I think is interesting because that links into. I'd never heard of this concept before, but my wife heard me talking about one of the things that he mentions in the compilation of sayings that someone made, and I mentioned it earlier on in the stream how he liked the feeling of like extracting the power out of other men, and it feels like this cam girl thing. Like I don't think I'd call it. I mean, it could get into prostitution in the absolute real meaning of the term, meaning like, you know, drawing of actually that's pornography. Never mind. Yeah, like in a way, yeah, it could imitate porn, but I can't help but notice, because I think that the guy is entirely driven by power, as I've said, right? I can't help but notice that the other way that he's engaging in power is not only yeah, okay, so someone mentioned in the chat about my wife, yeah, she called it energy vampirism. Apparently it's actually got a technical term behind it, but it's apparently a thing. Yeah, I know, right? But
no, it's I've heard it before. It's a something that only like women talk about. It's funny, like
yeah, it sounds like a woman. Yeah, it sounds like a white woman, like a narcissist white woman kind of thing to say. But I think it sums up.
It's something I definitely agree with. Like the concept of an energy vampire. Like this is the thing, right? Like we can't disrespect our own women. Like women also have like important insights. We need, again, this is part of actually overcoming animal possession, and this is just something that women are way more attuned to. Kind of somebody being an energy vampire. It's completely true. Like if you talk to a girl and she's kind of good with this stuff, and like she's like, oh, that person, total energy vampire, and then you speak to that person and you like want to like prove her wrong basically, and it's like, no, it just doesn't work. Like you actually feel exhausted once you've talked to that person. So yeah, definitely a concept that is real, even though it's, let's say, very, I don't know, loose, right?
Yeah, I just can't help, like, this is like hypothetical, but it seems I doubt he's thinking it that far through. He probably thought, or he seems to have thought with the cam girl thing, I can make a lot of money this way. This is a way that people are vulnerable. I can exploit this.
Well, I think we all agree that like at the end, we can define how bad he's been or what he's done exactly that we dislike. What I'm more interested in, have you guys seen people defending him and his actions on Twitter, like in the right wing? Like, why has the right wing gone out of its way to like, you know, defend Andrew Tate? I think it's just circumstance, right? He got in a fight with like Greta Thunberg on Twitter, and then when he gets in trouble, they, you know, like, oh, he's based, he's attacking the globalists and the Matrix, and so we have to like defend him.
I think you put it like very succinctly. Like I think a big reason is just that you feel like, you know, he's in our struggle basically, right? Like he is being cancelled or whatever, and he's being shut down, and he has the full force of the regime coming down on him. So you immediately feel a sort of kinship. Though I think also, and other people are probably like more attuned to get into that than me, is that a lot of people also just feel that he is a guru to them, and they feel like, no, actually he is the way towards masculinity, and this is actually kind of the power structure shutting down masculinity.
I think as well, just on that point briefly, there would be people in our sort of circles who would probably see him as something of a lightning rod, and that even though he does have this, you know, distasteful background and has done things that many of us who have a moralist streak would disagree with, that he sort of he upsets the right sort of people, you know, in the public sphere. It's just a case of ascertaining whether that is astroturfed or authentic. But I think there are some people too who are. I'm trying to think of how to explain this. I'll be succinct as possible. But you know, some of us who obviously come from, you know, you might say good families or raised with good people and had good role models, and there are men who come to the right wing from the opposite, who just don't have anyone, and sort of, you know, find their way through online circles to something that is more wholesome or more grounding. Say, for example, how a lot of people say my journey started with Jordan Peterson, but then I sort of surpassed him and then look back and realize that he's a grifter. But, you know, that was my pathway, my gateway to something better. I think sort of Tate represents one of the sort of characters as well in that sort of similar dimension of being a pathway from one thing to something else. And for some people, it's they might feel a sort of an affinity because of he represents some degree of metamorphosis. I think the problem is that, as we've talked about even whilst I've been here on this conversation, that Tate's sort of his thing, his what it is that he represents is entirely superficial. It's not quintessential. It's not from within himself. It's not this sort of natural phenomena that he's sort of expressed outwards. It's sort of what he's created. His brand is very sort of, it's superficial and thinly layered. And then what we just sort of see is this outward expression of what some people would deem to be masculinity, but it's not a true sort of spiritual, intellectual form of it.
It's actually build on what you've just said there, because I think I was talking to my little brother the other day, and he thinks that in prison that he'll wind up killing himself in convenient circumstances, but I don't think he will. And so I wanted to run this by you, because I wouldn't be surprised if in Islam Andrew Tate finds something more satisfying and then becomes an Islamic spiritual figure, and that could cause some issues. I'm kind of curious to hear what people here think about the potential of this happening would be.
I honestly think
I mean, thus far, I mean, like I said, I'm no Andrew Tate expert. That's why I had to bring on my 2 Andrew Tate experts. But thus far, it seems to me like his conversion to Islam has been purely cynical. So I mean, it's possible that could change. I mean, so I see you shaking your head there, Elliot. But like, I mean, I remember seeing a photo of him on an airplane, like drinking alcohol and smoking. Now, I don't know if you're allowed to smoke in Islam, but you're definitely not allowed to drink. And this is
drinking is certainly haram by the Islamic perspective.
I know you're definitely not allowed to drink. So it's no, and I'm not saying that like if you sin after your conversion, you're insincere. But there's one thing between sin. There's one thing. It's one thing to sin. It's another thing to take photos of yourself sinning and plastering it over the internet.
And then posting it on Instagram and profiting from the viral output of that. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, also, as far as I know, he has not stopped the cam girl stuff since becoming Muslim. That is also, I'm pretty sure, not
the reason. The reason I suggest this is because of the way he's reacting in prison. I wouldn't be surprised if the prison is what leads to him reconsidering his actions, right? Like we can say it. Like I don't want to compare him like on the level of sanctity to Francis of Assisi, but it was ultimately prison that drove Francis of Assisi down the set of steps that led to him going from the son of a wealthy cloth trader to the man we know as St. Francis, right? So I'm not suggesting, of course, by any means that he becomes some sort of saint. What I'm suggesting is that this might set something off in the human psyche that could lead to him being a religious leader, someone who takes Islam more seriously. That's what I'm suggesting.
That first step on the pathway to a.
I just from what I've seen thus far, I don't really see any reason to suspect that will happen. I mean, it's possible, but I don't really, I don't see any evidence for that yet.
Yeah, I think this conversion Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I'll just be very quick. I was going to say what you're sort of representing there, Venturis, is that this could potentially, for all we know, despite his, his painfully obvious degrees of cynicism in some of these actions, that by using the St. Francis example of Assisi, that for some people who are sincere, it might be that first step towards a metamorphosis of a journey, of a sort of a spiritual change, that there is always that first step that seems like it might not be authentic, but might lead to somewhere else. Whether it applies to Tate or not is a separate issue, but some people obviously traverse that path in life, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what the Tate thing seems to me is that like becoming a Muslim seems like the for him the right wing equivalent of like the boomer lib becoming a Buddhist thing. And I mean, I imagine some of those boomer libs that became Buddhists actually became real Buddhists, but I've known some of those people, and the vast majority, all really, that I know, are not real Buddhists. So it just seemed to me that in these types of circumstances, the norm is not to have a real conversion.
I agree with Sedler entirely. I think he's right. I think this is a shallow. I mean, you guys are talking about what motivates him is a pursuit of power. I think the reason he converted to something like Islam and not Christianity is because Islam, A, is a minority religion in the West and has more power within our institutions as a anti-Christian belief, and also has more power over the family governance. They have more power over their wives and over their kids, and are allowed, permitted, I guess, in some sects, I'm not a big scholar on this topic, to have multiple wives, or in every sect, I'm not sure, multiple wives, and have kids with multiple wives. And that's kind of his whole MO. So I think it's really shallow. And I think I would be surprised if he comes out of that that would be like saying like, oh yeah, Malcolm X is going to go to prison and then become a real Christian instead of a, further down, or a real Muslim, when in reality what actually happened is he just kind of went to prison and became more of a black nationalist, like type of weird cross between American, like black Hebrew Israelite and a Muslim, right? Like I think a lot of these types of characters use this use religion as like a tool and a bludgeon.
Yeah, I mean, I think this guy from the chat, Kia, makes a good point that he says, I could see a lot of Muslims following him and becoming more like him rather than him taking Islam more seriously. Yeah, I mean, I would be more concerned about that happening than the reverse.
I could definitely say that.
I know that's had an effect.
Yeah. I was going to say, I could definitely say that happening among, say, first and second generation Muslims who live in the West, same places such as Germany or the United Kingdom that have large resident Islamic populations. And the second thing too is just on the point of his conversion is that, I mean, let's not forget that sorry, I'm going to offer a very brief historical angle to this, is that much of the Eastern Mediterranean up until the 9th, 10th, 11th century was actually Christian rather than Islam. And then as Islam conquered it, its people gradually, under the weight of dimitude, converted to Islam over the years, just for the sake of it makes life easier. And let's not forget that Tate splits his time between Romania, which he's obviously gone back to Romania and got himself arrested, but he obviously lives in Qatar as well. And if you're a person who takes up residency in Qatar, and even if you're a wealthy expat, which a lot of Westerners do make their way to places such as Abu Dhabi or Qatar or Bahrain, etc., can live well, but you will have a more how can I put this? It is easy for you to get on and to get by in those countries if you are actually a Muslim. So there's also that aspect too that we haven't really touched on, which is actually worth considering. And that the Gulf, I mean, we call it the Persian Gulf, but the Gulf countries and Saudi, that part of the world there has become increasingly wealthy, vastly wealthy in the last sort of 20, 30, 40 years, which is sort of our kind of lifetimes thereabout. And the amount of you might say rich and powerful people who gravitate to those areas has increased dramatically as a result. And so it's sort of becoming a bit of a playground of the wealthy. And I suppose for Tate, we can't really ever delve into his mind or his spirit and know what is sincere and what is not. But there's certainly a part of me who, when I look at historical examples of people who have converted under the guise of an Islamic state in order to sort of not suffer dimitude. The Tate has probably converted in order to open up his own opportunities in that part of the world himself, on top of the things that other guys on the panel here have mentioned about, the permitted polyamory and this, you might say more etched notion of sort of parochial patriarchy, the sort of top-down family unit that one might say associate with, say, classical Rome or what have you, where the father is absolutely the preeminent member of the family, and then all other people subordinate to the father. That is still strong in Islam, whereas in Western Christianity, that has definitely been eroded over the last sort of 50, 60, 100 years. So that's a frame worth thinking about for those who may or may not agree.
I would disagree. I would disagree with that. And kind of like agree more with both David and Elliot, actually. I don't. So the thing with like converting, let's say for business reasons or like for reasons of opportunity, I don't know if that is something that, because I just haven't heard of it like being done at the moment in Qatar or like in any other of the Arab states. And usually like it just doesn't like happen only once, right? Like then many people do it for like business opportunities and stuff like that. I think the reason is actually that these Gulf states are still very much dominated by an international and not really religious elite, and so to actually get access to, let's say, the good deals there and to like the high or whatever you desire there, you actually don't need to be Muslim, because this isn't really run, let's say, the highest levels of it aren't really that much influenced by Islam. Though I will say that, of course, living in Qatar probably did have an influence on his choice of religion. But I would agree with Elliot in the sense that I do expect, like when he goes, like I think he's already in prison, right? Or when he goes into prison or whatever, that his Islam will strengthen. But I will also agree with Carlson that so the thing with religions like Islam, which aren't really well defined and which don't have good authority structures, right? And this is actually something. So the Protestantizing influence in Europe actually comes out of the Islamic world, right? The idea of sola scriptura actually has a kind of like a front built out of interaction with the Islamic world. Yeah, I'm sorry, David, I got to do it to you, but it's actually that's just European history. And the thing with non-organized
it is a fact that Queen Elizabeth I wrote a letter to the Ottoman Sultan explaining how Protestantism and Islam had a lot of similarities.
Yeah, I mean,
well, yeah, they're both like Abrahamic faiths. I mean, the same way. I mean, like
more than
I mean, she wrote it specifically in contrast to Catholicism.
But David, to kind of reach out the olive branch, you can of course say, well, whatever Protestant denomination you belong to is well organized. Okay, so the point here is mostly about organization, because of course, let's say sola scriptura, if applied correctly, is way less drastic than the Islamic version of it, right? In Islam, the Quran is like the literal word of God, right? Like God speaking himself word for word. So it is actually impossible to be intelligible, right? And then you have the entire thing about
that depends on theological school. Like you have a certain school of theologians which I believe went to the Shia, known as the Mu'tazila, who would disagree with this. And they disagree even within Sunni Islam about what the Quran, as in the recitation, actually means, whether it's an attribute of God or whether it's the book itself. So it's not as straightforward as that.
Yeah, fair enough. In Tate's case, we of course think about Sunni Islam, and we specifically think about Ottoman-inspired Sunni Islam, right? So and there, like the word is like, it is very much, let's say, able, and it has played out itself such in the history of Ottoman Sunni Islam, that although the let's say the note of interpretation that was given was the Ottoman state, right? That was the authoritative interpretation of Sunni Islam effectively. That being taken away nowadays, Islam is kind of like much more of an interpretive religion. So Tate will very likely just, let's say, intensify in whatever he believes Islam to be now, just like Malcolm X intensified in what he believed Islam to be for him, which for him made him more of a black nationalist, because in the end he defined his own Islam. And Andrew Tate very likely chooses Islam because it kind of aligns well for him, right? It probably, especially in the way in which he chooses it, especially in the way in which it's probably influenced by the country of Qatar, is not very condemning of his women trafficking things, if not outright, let's say, silent on those issues, is allowing him to basically square up his past or even like present life as a pickup artist, manosphere kind of guy, into something that he doesn't really have to repent for, and at the same time also provides him with some idea of spirituality, some idea of something higher, and some idea of something right now in prison that will get him through this. And of course, Romanian, like the prison he is in, even though it's in Romania, is probably not like a Romanian out of country terrible shack prison. It's probably actually very survivable, and so just he doesn't really need a real engagement with the basics of his beliefs to get through that. And so just the idea of having something will probably be enough to get him through this experience.
I mean, I was told by a friend of ours who was a convert from Shia that the people who evangelized, or Dawah, I think their term is, right? The people who evangelized him, for lack of a better term, were the Joel Osteen side of Sunni Islam. So they were the sorts of people that believe, oh, if you believe in Tawheed, if you believe in the angels, and you do your 5 prayers, you'll be fine, right? So like the very low tier kind of Islamic preachers, I'm told. So that might be a possibility.
I have had some interaction with internet Muslims debating them online occasionally.
They're not sitting their best, frankly.
Yeah, and they are not saying their best. I do get very strong evangelical vibes from them.
By the way, most of the time evangelicals are also not sitting their best. So
yeah. And no, I mean, there's a lot of evangelicals I love. I mean, Doug Wilson isn't exactly what I would normally think of as an evangelical, but he does call himself an evangelical.
Yeah, he's a special guy.
But yeah, no, that there's lots of great evangelicals. Check out Pew statistics on social issues. Evangelicals are by far the best.
We take the cake
in the U.S.
once again.
I mean that said,
what does the Bible say, by the way, about the fruits being the proof of faith or whatever? I don't know.
Which version of the Bible? How many books?
I do, of course, in contrast to that, I do want to point out that it's just a historical fact that it's the Catholics who founded the pro-life movement in America. But
they all launder money through their organizations and literally strike down bills that mention religious text. Trust me, dude, I worked in the pro-life organizations in America, and alongside them, that's not an argument you want to make. Just take my word for it, dude. It's so much worse than you think. It's so bad.
There wasn't even a Protestant aspect of the pro-life movement for like the first couple of decades.
Oh, I'm sure I wasn't around in the 60s, but yeah. I can tell you what they are today.
I'm
not. But that's politics in general. That's like all politics.
But no. So sorry. Just the point of Islam I was going to make is, a lot of them have like a sort of and I don't think this is anything necessarily intrinsic to evangelical even, but there's a lot of Muslims I've found in like just my internet debates with them that have. They really seem to have a culture that's similar to like contemporary evangelicals, and they sort of seem to have similar, and they sort of seem to have a similar attitude. But that's beside the point. Okay, so I'm definitely not much of an expert on Islam. I don't go to my way to try to debate the Muslims. I just occasionally bump into them. But ST, is this even really an entirely accurate comparison? Sola Scriptura Protestantism. I like to bring up the historical tidbit of Queen Elizabeth because it's funny. But are Muslims even really Sola Scriptura? They seem to me to have a pretty robust tradition of interpretations that they're bound to.
No, they don't. I'll be back in a second.
They don't. So what they do have is the surahs, right? Where it's like you have these like how do you call that? The commentaries on the Quran, basically, right? And the hadiths and everything. And it's like, so basically, there's like an entire like culture of commentary, and then
wrong. I literally went off to go do something. I hear you say that, and it's wrong. They're not called surahs. Okay. Surahs are the chapters of the Quran. You mean sunnah. And they also vary between sects as well, and there are different rankings. It's like historical criticism. There's a lot to it.
We can settle it over an arm wrestling.
I'll let you continue now.
Okay, but I was thinking about the hadiths, wasn't I? And somebody also mentioned that in chat. And basically, so what happens is you have like, depending on who you're, well, I don't know the name for them. In Germany, we always call them mufti, which is kind of a derogatory term for a Muslim faith leader. Depending on like who you follow, whose tradition you follow, you do have like different versions of interpreting the Quran, and you take different because of course when you have like an interpretation text to your, like the interpretation text can invalidate the original text to whatever degree you desire, right? Just think like if we think about Christianity, think about Gnostic movements, right? Which basically invert Christianity to the nth degree, depending on which movement you're talking about, right? Where like, or the God of the Old Testament against the God of the New, stuff like that, right? So if you like have commentaries that are just as authoritative, then you can basically make the scripture say whatever you want. So that is a difference there. Then there's also a difference between sects. So of course, like Sunni, Shia, so on and so forth, are very important also, which are kind of actually the backbone between modern Shia in many ways, but they're also very influential in the Sunni world, are the Sufis, which people know as kind of like the very mystical Muslims, who also, for example, have the dancers. They actually, like the Sufi movement creates recaptures the entire region of Iran, right? So the entire Iranian region at some point was like taken over by like a Sufi sect basically that kind of ran it for a while, which also bled into the Ottoman Empire, kind of just as it became big. Somebody says it's
Okay,
think
okay.
this
I feel like
I think
I
this was
feel
a
like you
little
might be
bit-
going into a bit too much depth on this.
Yeah.
My point is that like this doesn't really sound like sola scriptura to me.
Depending
I
on who you
also-
are, yeah. It sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. It's never
It's
really.
more like-
I mean, I'm
exact.
not
more like
even saying
Judaism.
that it's particularly close to the Catholic view either. I mean, if anything, it sounds more of like what I've heard about Judaism with the Talmud
Yes.
and the Mishnah.
Exactly.
But I know it seems somewhat unfair to say that this is just sola scriptura.
Okay. Elliot also wanted to say something, I think.
It's also like, at least to me, not so much nowadays because there's been increasingly recently a domination of private judgment in Sunni circles, at least. I think it's called Ittihad, right? Where they have like just people making up their own opinions. It wasn't always historically like this. There are 4 jurisprudential schools that are generally followed in Sunni Islam, and they actually excommunicated each other quite a bit. But they vary quite a lot in how they interpret things. So there's often an emphasis of how things are done in the city, Medina, I believe it is. And this is the I can't remember the precise ordering of the different names of the different jurisprudential schools, but they'll sometimes rely on the judgment of the judge. They'll sometimes refer to, as you mentioned, Hadith literature, and the work with Hadith literature is actually quite complicated because you have the 6 standard Sunni Sahih common Hadith collections, which are important, but then they've got different ranks to how reliable they are, and then you have to make judgments about that. And it's kind of like when you have the really sophisticated Protestant scholars going through the Church Fathers and looking at these, and then they have certain sets of jurisprudential rules on how to judge it and certain historical criticisms or exegetical rules. It is actually a lot like big brain. It's a lot like a mixture between like the Judaism that we typically see and kind of a big brain reformed kind of Christianity. It's quite strange. But I wouldn't.
Because
yeah.
somebody in chat says people making up their own opinions is basically what Protestantism is. It really only is in like very certain sects. And David is spitting.
Oh man, you're right.
I bet you never thought about that one, David.
No.
Oh god.
Yeah, that's like
it's
it
over
really, like,
for me.
the thing with just I wanted to say here and kind of with the parallel I make between Islam and Protestantism with regards to sola scriptura, I don't mean like like Islam make up their own definition, like Muslims make up their own Islam like all the time basically, because that's not how it works in Protestantism either. Like sola scriptura doesn't mean like you just take your trusty Bible and you basically become your own pastor, right? It means that in like certain regions, certain versions of Protestantism, but it does like that's not how it works. What it instead says is basically how just kind of like how the authority structure works, how your authority is derived and everything, right? So Islam, Sunni Islam, Shia Islam, both of them have like, and people mentioned that before, generally have these like, as Elliot said, this coming together of scholars who kind of define what their religion means. But then, of course, the thing that this develops always into is just scholarly dispute, and that gives the range for people to kind of go in and basically make their own Islam whatever they want to be. And historically, what happens is that basically, of course, the people of high power in Islam, because the scholarly, let's say the scholarly world is always divided and it's never really able to settle down on something that is like very prescriptive, the people in power in Islam usually end up being the ones who set the tune, right? And who say, well, like find me a way. This goes with Islam, basically, and that is more how it goes. And nowadays, it allows, because it's more obfuscated, because it's more contested, it allows for people like Andrew Tate to define these things for themselves and to shop within the accepted opinions the things he wants to find. But it's not like he would go into a mosque and he would basically like whip out his own ideas, and then everybody would be like, oh, Andrew Tate, yeah, like you're totally a Muslim, like Islam is about whatever you find in the Quran for you, right? There's like maybe like some like very weird sects that are there, but like I just wanted to spell that that's not how it works in the current Muslim world at all. There are these authority structures, they are deriving from these scholars, and they do regularly kind of set up, they kind of give out so people sometimes make these online jokes where it's like Pope announces Bible 2.0. This time it contains the entire Star Wars saga or something like that. Although it couldn't happen like that, like something like that technically can happen within at least Sunni Islam. So the scholars technically can like more or less re-announce the entire Quran as like something different. It wouldn't happen realistically, but the way Sunni Islam is set up, it technically could.
Well, you'd require an entire consensus of scholars in that case.
Yes,
because their view is that like the Ummah, like the Prophet's community, like the scholars in there as a whole aren't going to fail because God is, in control of the community.
Yeah, I mean, I know that seems sort of silly to say that, like, oh, they could just come up with Quran 2.0, because that just seems to me to be presupposing Islam is false and criticizing it on that basis. I mean, I know like Protestants would say the same thing about the Catholic magisterium, that, oh, the Pope can just declare whatever he wants, and then Catholics have to say it's infallible.
Well, but the thing is, of course, like, say you wouldn't have a Quran 2.0 because, again, like the Quran would be the written word of God. But effectively, like Islam could like change on a dime. Like it could reinterpret itself technically from today onto tomorrow. So things like a structure of canon law, like a need for necessary continuity and stuff like that, these are only accidental in Islam because of how humans work, right? Because if nowadays this surah means this and that surah means that, and then tomorrow they mean the opposite thing, nobody would believe it, right? But within the structure of Islam, there's actually nothing that sets against that, nor is it ever mentioned that there would be a necessity for that. So Catholics would say this would never happen, right? We have the promise of Christ that the church basically maintains this continuity. It is built upon rock, right? But there is like no thought of that in Islam. It is the authority rests within the Quran, who's the revealed word of God, and the task of humanity is just to interpret the Quran. And so even though we shouldn't expect it to happen ever, the idea that, let's say, the scholars actually come together and they go, oh, we missed like the real point of the Quran the entire time, and they completely re-announce it basically, is something that is technically possible within the religion. And that again derives itself from kind of seeing the Quran as the thing of authority and center and like absolute connection with God, basically. Well, not absolute connection with God, but as again like this written word of God.
I think this is an aggressive oversimplification. Like there are certain quite powerful sects in Islam that won't actually interpret the Quran at all, really. So, for example, the Salafi or the proto-Salafi, I think there's one theologian called Ibn Taymiyyah who was associated with the Hanbali school of jurisprudence, which is basically the most intense of the schools of jurisprudence. He wouldn't even determine whether or not Allah had a body or not, and that ended up with him getting thrown in prison. Right? This is something that we as Roman Catholics, and I think it's the same with a lot of Protestants as well, and probably the Orthodox too, like probably with Jews as well. This is one of the first things that we discuss, whether or not God has a body. And then we almost all definitively say, no, he doesn't have a body. So, this is quite a significant portion of Islam that doesn't even go as far as to interpret something like this. But I think we've spent a lot of time talking about Islam. Maybe we should get back onto Andrew Tate.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Did you have anything to say,
You
Elliot?
really
about Andrew?
separate a man from the religion he's just converted to.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I mean, I
truly.
no, I mean, I agree that would be important if it seemed sincere. But I mean, like I said, I don't like trying to find out what's in people's hearts, but I don't think that we're judging Andrew Tate's lack of sincerity based on anything particularly complicated. I think his manifest public actions have made his lack of sincerity clear.
Should I answer Kay Lewis? Because he's actually asked an important question or said an important thing. But Jesus is God and he has a body. Kay Lewis in the chat, he's also mentioned some people that I used to know. Yeah. So what I mean here when I say that God doesn't have a body, I mean the divine essence, meaning that which exists eternally. Right? Now, I think we can all agree if Jesus was born of Mary and was conceived of Mary, that Jesus' human essence didn't exist before he was conceived. And this is where we get the doctrine of the hypostatic union in Orthodox and Catholic theology and a lot of Protestant theology. I think there are probably some weird prots who dissent from this. But Christ is a combination of human nature and divine nature. When I say that God doesn't have a body, I'm saying that the divine nature doesn't have a body of itself. And in fact, it can't have that because a body necessitates change and God doesn't change. But God does take on a body in his incarnation. So that's what I mean when I say we almost universally say that yes, God doesn't have a body.
Okay. I mean, if we're just going to go off on tangents, then I really want David Carlson's insights on the American anti-abortion movement.
Kay Lewis has just accused me of Nestorianism. No, because they're unified. If I were a Nestorian, I'd be saying that the personhoods were different. I'm just affirming the Council of Chalcedon.
Yeah, I think the to kind of hopefully bookend this, the distinction here is kind of in how you mean God has a body, right? God has a body in the sense that Christ's body is his body, right? And Christ is there in embodied form. And then, but God himself, the Trinity, doesn't exist physically. Right? It's not.
Well, you're good, Elliot. The guy said he was joking, so you're fine.
Yeah. I just thought I was going to chime in and say, okay, that's fair enough. I can see, but
I'll ban him. You want me to ban him? I'm a mod. I'll ban him.
No.
Yeah. How dare you question Elliot, one of my top theology minions? Banned.
You don't know my name. My name is going to be Pius when I'm elected. Okay.
Pius.
Yeah.
French, my papal name would be Francis II.
It's interesting because I made a joke on Twitter this afternoon where Shia LaBeouf dressed up as a woman for some reason, and I was making a joke about how a couple months ago he came out and was like everybody was like, yeah, he's Christian now, and someone asked, anyone want to take a shot explaining to me what Shia LaBeouf is up to nowadays? And it's him dressed in some basically cross-dressing, makeup, high heels, weird womanly toga. And I said, Tradcaf to Finboy Pipeline strikes again. And all my Catholic friends are they're very upset at this. And so this whole stream I've been typing back and forth with them. You should go check it out on my Twitter. I'm it's just I can't even make jokes without people getting. And this is why I enjoy talking to you guys so much about this stuff specifically, because we're able to trade blows back and forth. Admittedly, you guys are better, more knowledgeable on these topics than I am, the theology. So you guys do it better than I do. But some people, man, just get so offended at these things, and it just makes me want to ram my head into it.
I mean, I think especially when people, so a lot of tradcaths and people who identify with tradcath, they're very, very new to faith, right? Tradcath is usually a reaction to, The West has fallen, or something similar. But it's a general, like it's a liminal experience. It's a reaction to seeing that things aren't going as they're supposed to, and wanting to identify something that is like authentically Western, that is really where you can really be sure that it's part of our tradition. And so for a lot of them, it's kind of like dipping into something that is very, very foreign to them. And then when you talk to us, you talk to people who I've been Catholic for 4 years now, and I'm like regularly at my church, and I've like really entrenched myself in my own Catholicism. I know like where my Catholicism starts and where it ends. But then there's people on Twitter, like many of them, they're just like new to it. They don't really know like what it really is yet. They know they want to adhere to it. So they just like they don't know like what parts are there to be defended and what parts aren't. And so it gets them riled up very, very quickly.
It's just like it's just like anything else that is a person's identity. If a person has like is a diva or has a lot of pride or maybe some insecurities, and you make a comment about like short people. It's like this. It's like you make a comment about short people, and then all the bald, like short dudes, like go insane in the comments. It's like the same thing. It's just because it's tied in with their identity, and they can't take a joke. It says more about them than it does about like the fact that they are that.
Just on this point, just to throw it out there, have you guys ever met a short woman who hasn't made being short her entire personality?
Oh yeah, plenty.
Yes.
Really, like I swear, like I've never had that. Like every time I've met a short woman in my life, she always mentioned at some point that she was short, and she always like mimed the same. So maybe I'm just hanging out around the.
Well, no, I mean, I think it's fair to say that a lot of women that I've met that are short, like, do point out the fact that, like, oh yeah, I'm so short, but it's not like it's like a central personality point. For some of them, it is. For like the really like short ones, for like the very small ones, yeah, totally. But like for like the average woman is like what, 5'4", 5'6", somewhere between there. So if you get someone on like the 5'2", or God forbid the less than 5 feet, percentile, then yeah, it's like their personality, like very short, yeah, but most heights slightly below average. No, I wouldn't say so.
However, you always get the ones who are like definitely like sort of sub 5'6", sub 5'4", who will almost without fail make the joke of, like, oh, I need a boyfriend because I can never reach the top shelf, like at the supermarket or my pantry. It's like saving me from getting a chair, So yeah, no,
it's so annoying. I can't stand these people.
David is just absolutely seething and coping this whole stream.
I mean, what she's really saying is
yeah,
she needs
really,
a boyfriend. Yeah. She needs a boyfriend because it will help her cope with the horrible depression.
There was this one time I was okay. So
and opening jars, of course.
Woman beds.
That is a real thing.
But it's like girls like that though. They go, "Oh, I just want to get married, and but nobody's right, and blah 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 blah." It's just like just respond, and be like, "Okay, I'll marry you," and then see what they do. They're gonna be like, "Oh, what do you mean? No." It's like, okay, shut up. It's like, I just want to get married. Okay, well. Oh, I just need a boyfriend. Okay, I'll be your boyfriend. It's like, it's total, just like a way that they express their insecurities, and want to make themselves feel better about these things.
Girls absolutely destroy
David is just saying
logic by David.
Yeah, David is just saying this for when we uncover all the DMs where he's like just messaging women, "I'll marry you." And he's saying, watch that stream.
I am speaking from experience. Like there was this one girl that was just like, "Oh, I'm so upset," and I was like, "What's wrong?" And she was like, "I just there's nobody that's right. There's just like, I just want to get married. I want to find a boyfriend." And I was sitting across the table at a diner with my buddies and his girlfriend, and I was like, "Well, how am I supposed to respond to this?" And the girl was just like, "Well, just." She was like, just respond and say, "I'll marry you." And I was like, "But I won't." She was like, "Don't worry, she won't." And I was like, "Okay, whatever." So I did, and then instantly, she obviously was like, "Oh no, stop teasing me," and I was like, "Okay, yeah."
She's flirting then.
Yeah, literally.
Don't. Don't pick me.
Exactly. No, that's exactly what I mean. It's just like a method of flirting. Like it's a pick me. It's like a pick me kind of like personality trait. Oh, I'm so short. Oh, nobody likes the short people. Oh, I'm so single. Nobody likes me. It's like I can't stand people that are like that. But anyways, Andrew Tate probably takes advantage of people like that. So
Nice segue.
I mean, he says
nice
that Western
segue.
women are easy to take. He says he's
Full
got an
circle.
extremely low view of Western women. I will say that.
well, who doesn't?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think we've really talked in too much detail about what exactly Andrew Tate has done. We've just sort of given a broad overview. I mean, again, I'm not an Andrew Tate expert, but just from the videos I've seen, I mean, it's not just that he's a pornographer, but the stuff, again, just from the clips, perhaps there's some possibilities of context. That's why I'm bringing this to my Andrew Tate experts here. It seems like the stuff he's done is extremely abusive. What do my Andrew Tate experts have to say about that?
And just to categorize too, it definitely oscillates somewhere between extremely abusive and perhaps on the other side of the ledger, it's, if not abusive, extremely coercive and manipulative. There's sort of like this triangle of different sort of, dark traits that sort of play into, if you just sort of put those three things at opposite ends of a triangle, a lot of these actions of his definitely sit somewhere in that prism.
Somebody in chat says, in my experience, hypersexual men are all mama's boys. Again, that kind of goes back into, I don't know if you were there for that, the thing I mentioned again with from Jungian psychology, the idea of anima possession, is that, yes, like kind of like when, again, the anima defines itself in large parts out of the mother. That's also why, this is actually something that we probably should mention in the stream, is talking about kind of like the society that that created and like the fame of Andrew Tate, again going down that he organically rose to fame, is of course just the pandemic of single motherhood, right? Because like when you are raised by a single mother, you're always a mama's boy in some degree, and to get through this point of anima possession, not having a father figure in your life, who of course is your model on how to, I mean, your father is the person who basically like has integrated, like has like entered into union with your mother, right? So he ideally, let's say, he has overcome his own anima and found his connection with your mother. So of course, if you have that in your life, then it's very easy for you to yourself make this journey into individuation. But then if you don't have a father figure in your life and you only have a single mother, then of course the role that the feminine, that your own anima takes up within you is much, much, much more present. And so the idea of kind of like the availability for hypersexualization, people always say, oh, it's about porn in society. And of course, porn plays a huge role, right? But we kind of are at danger of kind of like picking out a single factor and saying this is solely responsible, right? And another huge point of responsibility also in the people who defend pornography, and it kind of what unites them, is again just the presence of single motherhood. This is also why Andrew Tate kind of became famous in the circles in which he did, because many, many, many right-wing circles actually are from like nowadays less, but many of the young guys who are kind of like naturally into the right wing are people who have like a very strong father figure in their lives, who kind of come from good families, and they're just kind of shocked that everybody else is insane, right? That people can't talk about certain topics. I don't know how many dissidents I've talked to which were from good families, where they were just like, why? Like I was in school, like for me this started in school, and like the people just didn't want to talk about certain topics in a correct way, right? And of course, the massive difference there is a father figure present in your life or isn't he? And of course, in the spheres that Andrew Tate like sought out, primarily kind of orientated around ghetto rap, orientated around kind of like this thug culture of this. I mean, all of that was something that was already appealing to like boys without a father figure, and was taking part in milieux of absent fathers. Of course, primarily that being, well, I don't know how PC Settler wants the stream to be, but the milieu which is known for absentee fathers. So that is something that is very defining in him coming into being and into coming into the position that he is.
Oh, so I mean, I guess I guess the way of solving this whole anime possession issue is to just ban anime, since apparently
Nice.
this is the main problem here.
Yeah. Okay. Anima
I'm sorry,
possession.
just quickly, super chat. K. Lewis, here's some money. Thanks for reading my chats. No
So we each
worries.
get $1 from that, right? We split it up 5
No,
ways.
I keep it all because I'm more important than you guys.
Hey, my channel, American Virtue and DC Perspective combined, beats yours, and we're gaining, we're catching up to you. So
Yeah, sorry. I mean, one American Virtue is not just your channel, so does not.
I
count.
manage it, executive director. Hello.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. I mean, here's how we can do it. One, you can only count one channel at a time. But if you want to make a spreadsheet and go through every single video on American Virtue and figure out what percentage of videos you're in, then you can count that percentage worth of subs as you.
Oh man, I would just like David will become like super popular and then just always just go on Settler streams and take all his money at some point.
That's
always
right.
like you're just building up the machine of your own demise here, Settler.
This is a.
I mean, I wouldn't be clear here. I mean, even if Dave got bigger, I'm not going to give him the money. I'm just saying,
I mean, the other Dave.
Oh,
distributors
yeah?
never
Oh,
sees
really?
a dime. Actually, do you pay Dave to come on your live streams? I assume you do.
distributors? No,
He wouldn't give you any other time otherwise.
the distributors. No, I mean he'll go on live streams with anyone.
No, he's cool. This is very nice of him
Hmm.
to join you to help Make a Wish Foundation. I'm sorry. I'm just.
Yeah, no, I mean
just being.
K. Lewis. I mean this is actually just false. I mean, Japan has like the highest birth rates in East Asia.
Yeah, it's true.
Is that actually really?
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
Oh yeah. No, the
East Asia
truth
down
of that
bad.
is-
You know,
Yeah,
second thought knows a lot about China and their espionage, and he knows a lot about East Asia. I'm curious if he took the deal that he was talking about earlier in the stream or not.
I mean,
can't tell.
I'm just going to say, everyone, I would have taken the deal if
I
was
will.
the-
But look, I'm not going to say anything.
Well, okay, okay, sorry, I retract that because I want to make sure when the CCP comes to me, I have a good bargaining position. I will take it
Right.
if it's a good deal.
If it's a good
okay?
deal, that's right. That's exactly right. That's smart.
Yeah, I think I don't want to indulge that part too much. But I didn't take the deal though. I guess I have to clarify that. But yeah, no, just, I mean the country. I mean China, of course, is something which now everybody is bearish on. You know, now I can't even be cool like for being bearish on China because everybody's like, oh yeah, China's like back in the day, like when I had these connections, I was talking to people and like, oh, I can like this was ridiculous. I was like a friend of mine, also from these spheres, was doing a geopolitical analysis video on China, and I was like joking with him, should I get you somebody from the CCP on? And he was like joking back, yeah, sure, why not? So I just like text one of these guys, and I'm like, I need to talk to somebody from the CCP, and he just texts me back with the words, what level? I was like, wait a second, that's a possibility, like a real possibility. It's like, yeah, what do you need? Like, what, like, are we talking like small? It's like big shot. Like, how, like, I can get you so and so far. It's like, what? But
I would have responded the furthest you can get me.
yeah. No, I
With
mean,
your top
I
guy.
immediately got like cold feet. I was like, I'm just joking. Please don't contact
Oh,
anybody.
dude, that's so
Um,
lame.
They don't
See,
speak
you
English.
should have done it.
That's what actually what he said. It's like he said what level, and then when we would talk, like I was joking for a bit with him, but he was like, just keep in mind, like the high ups don't speak English as well because they're only like inside China. But
Translator.
anyway, so the point is back then it was like having these insights and like from people who are like, oh yeah, I'm putting all my money into Europe, basically being like, oh, it's cool to be bullish on China, to be bearish on China, because you have this insider knowledge, always mogging like other people. I'm like, China isn't going anywhere, America will always beat it. Nowadays, much less so, right? Everybody watches Peter Zeihan, everybody knows China isn't really going anywhere. But the cool country to be bearish on is South Korea, right? South Korea isn't going anywhere. Birth rates are in the gutter. The whole country is just one city, basically. the real cool position to have is that North Korea will outlast South Korea. That's like the edgy position you can have, which might actually be true.
Wow, is it that bad in South Korea?
I mean, the country is perpetually run by cults, right? It's like
He knows the
super
deep
weird.
lore. He knows the deep lore. That's
Oh
real.
yeah. Oh my. When I was in Macau, actually, my roommate was he was the son of a major South Korean politician, and he kind of like got me into the South Korean circuits in Macau. It was, I mean, South Korea is just.
Oh, okay. So you
bruh.
lived in Macau?
I was in Macau for 6 weeks, then I got evacuated because of the virus. Yeah.
That was the beginning of your op, wasn't it? I'm just putting the pieces together, man.
Like-
Nothing here makes sense with you.
Like David, right? Like I've met this guy in real life. His surname is Lee. Okay, that's all you need to know.
This guy,
yeah.
ST Lee. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no. Oh man.
my handlers are going to get very upset that we're communicating.
wrong communities are meeting. Oh man, no. The funny thing with you saying that's when your op started is when I was evacuated from South Korea and I went to Poland. That is not from South Korea, sorry, from Macau, and I went to Poland. That is actually when I started my YouTube channel. So it's not too wrong. Yeah. Oh man.
Nice.
Okay, can we get back to other topics, please?
I don't know.
I mean, I feel like we're pretty close to being done here. I try and wrap this up around 2 hours, and we're 4 minutes from.
I surprisingly have a lot more in me, Sadler. I think we should keep going for another 2.
That's true. I'm actually very animated. I have overcome my anima.
You
for
have
this stream.
anime possession.
Yeah.
Okay. First another super chat. Cringe Walker for $2. Seediest East Asian versus breediest European. I only vaguely understand what that even means.
That's totally like a peak Zoomerism.
Yeah.
I love it. It's good.
But yeah, I know. I mean, I feel like now is a good time to wrap up.
Okay.
I suppose final thoughts on the topic. Does anyone have anything to say?
I don't think we've heard the last of him by any means.
I think we did. He's done after this. He's either going to die, he's going to die himself, you know what I mean? Like your brother keeps suggesting, or he's just going to go away. He will maybe
Walls are closing in.
The walls are closing in, Tate bros. Wrap it up. But I honestly, I just have to like disagree with you. I think that if he does come back, he'll come back the same way like Toby Tobuscus has come back. Like he's just like an internet lurker now that kind of makes content sometimes. Or there's got to be like a better analogy to this. Like Jack Murphy. Like Jack Murphy came back, and not in the physical way, but online presence. He's returned to Twitter and makes content again, but nobody cares. Like his clout has been incredibly diminished. Because of this among the mainstream. He will forever have this following him around, and there will be sectors of the, there will be members in our sector that still like him, and he definitely has a strong following still, but it's not as strong as it was, and it won't be mainstream. And it doesn't mean he doesn't need the mainstream to succeed, but to the extent that we will see him again, it's like, but it won't be it won't hold a candle to the amount that we have seen him in the past. And that's where I'll leave that.
Although, in fairness, I don't think the fate that befall Tate would be quite as nearly as humiliating as Mr. Beard Murphy himself. I think that was quite a without pertaining into details, because obviously this is a Settlers channel. I don't, and I'm sure no one wants any filth or disgusting sort of stuff being echoed. But if anyone's interested, so check Murphy yourself. You'll find out for your own accord. But it's positively sort of disgusting and quite shameful. And let's just say one man is on one side of the camera lens, and one man's on the other side of the camera lens, and definitely being on one side of that equation is worse than the other. So when it comes from the standpoint of humiliation, so I get your point, David, but I don't know if they're exactly as bad as one another. But on that basis, if I may say so, just I suppose if we're talking final thoughts, I think Tate represents one of those, and there's a plethora of examples of these people existing in public discourse and places like Twitter and Facebook and even the mainstream occasionally. You can even say the same thing about someone like Peterson or, whoever, is that, these are broken clocks, and, once or twice a day they're correct, but for the rest of the time they're not. And take what little sort of minuscule things may be useful if one should so need that. But, I think from the standpoint is if someone wants or has a desire for or is curious about what may help them in life, or what would, quantify an objectively better pathway forward, you would do better reading, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. You'd do better by, reading Seneca or Cicero, or, you'd do better off reading classical scholarship. Thank you, the Bible.
Get mocked.
Well, hang on. These things can coexist with each other. I'm just saying this as a classicist. It's one thing to read the Bible, but I mean, there are things that the Bible doesn't canvas. So, these things have to coexist with each other. So the point I'm making is that there are better sources of wisdom and knowledge out there, and so I would urge people to give these modern day camera whores, a wide berth, and look to your predecessors. There are far wiser people who exist in our past, and take people like Tate and Peterson and whoever with, a profoundly strong degree of salt. And that's basically all I have to say.
Yeah, no, I
Actually,
think that's great advice.
Sadly, I
Go
think this
ahead,
actually
Tate.
provides a good opportunity for me to talk about my new channel. So, as
Yeah.
everyone knows, I always make new channels. So, what I'm doing with my channel at the moment is actually directly related to the classics. So, what I've been doing is, I know there are a lot of Catholics, like usually Catholics. There'll probably be people here who are interested in classical civilization generally. But what I've been doing is, for the sake of people who are beginning in Latin reading, like beginning to learn the grammar and stuff like this, and like they've got a basic grasp on it, I've made readers with original Latin texts with the hard words, given definitions, so that you can go along and read them and get better at the language as you go. And I'm offering, there's currently, if you want to just test it out, you can go on my Patreon and find the first epistle of John from the New Testament for free. But I've also got glossed a bunch of other books from the New Testament and the first book of Caesar's Gallic Wars. And you can get them for about £7, or I think it's $7.50 US for like, so I'm building a library. So if you want to get access to the religious stuff, it's $7.50. If you want to get access to the just classical history stuff, at $7.50. You can get both for about £10. So if you're interested in that, or just to keep up with my new content, please go and subscribe to my channel and have a look at my Patreon.
Yeah, check that out, and of course that would come up to about $200 Canadian. But I'm sure it's great content. Check that out, everyone. And before we get to the other shillings, we have one other
that's crazy
super chat. For $20, not much mention of his brother Tristan, who bragged about taking the virginity of a pious Orthodox girl. They are just grifters, IMO. Yeah, the only thing I remember seeing from his brother, I'm not familiar with this example, sounds like the type of thing you'd expect from them, but so I don't doubt its validity. But the only thing I remember really seeing from his brother was the tweet he sent out saying that they had gotten like lots of letters of support from Muslims and none from Christians, and this is, I don't know, proof that Islam is true and that it was good that he converted or something. I don't know.
Yeah. So just on finishing on Andrew Tate, kind of like finishing thoughts, just something that came to mind for me was, in Germany we have this character, rapper Chata, is like a, I don't know where he's from, but like something Arabic. And he kind of builds his entire persona on having been in prison, basically. And of course now he's like the post prison, and like he smuggled his rap verses to prison, and they were published at the time. Everything, it's all very cringe, but of course people lap it up. And
It's time to shill.
Okay, go ahead.
Me? Oh, Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at DavidNC__AV, as in audio and video. And that's basically it. From there you can follow everything else I do. Mainly American Virtue on Twitter and YouTube and Instagram. Recently just reached like over 1 million views on Instagram for 3 shorts we uploaded. Very exciting. So lots of good ideas coming out of that. Check it out.
I guess I would just go counterclockwise. Whatever. I don't know. I'm next to David on my screen, so I'll just go next. Yeah, I'm ST. Probably like people are somewhat familiar with me nowadays. I think I've been in most of the recent Setless Lament streams, or many of the. I don't know. Sorry. And anyways, I have a YouTube channel, which is kind of like my main modus of operandi. I recently did a stream with Elliot over here where I kind of like, again, laid out the past of my journey into the right wing, laid out the future of where I want to kind of take things. I also make mention of my Substack, which you can also find on that video. And again, if you want to talk about like these deep topics, I'm kind of like, I do research on like I don't know if we even want to call it research, but like just kind of present a lot of like idiosyncratic ideas, amalgamate them into videos, and put up, let's say, what I just view as a necessity, kind of like a reformulated worldview that is able to engage the modern world and hopefully able to decipher it better. So if you guys, like my ramblings on here, like kind of the topics or the constructs I kind of bring into discussion, then you might like my YouTube channel, and it's probably linked in the description.
Yeah, everyone's stuff is linked in the description. And for some inexplicable reason, you are one of the favorites. According to the commenters, when I occasionally read them, which I try to avoid.
Based.
He's obviously Aussie German charm. Well, I suppose I'll go then. Yeah, well, I actually don't have a whole lot to shield, just if you fancy following me on Twitter. I often mostly appear on history streams with Apostolic Majesty. At the end of last year, we just finished our 2 series, one which was Orthodoxy, Autocracy, and Nationalism, which was sort of the story of in one part, story of the Greeks, and another part, the story of Orthodoxy broadly in sort of the Russian, Balkan, and Byzantium context, and another being the history of essentially the nations of Charlemagne. So that pertained to Italy, Gaul/France, and obviously HRE/Germany. So we sort of more or less got to the terminus of those at the end of last year. We have a few things in the pipeline for this year, although AM is taking a well-deserved little holiday. So nothing is scheduled just for the moment. But I think we're going to kick off the year with a stream about the feudal Japan, and sort of a little mini series about the warring states, the Tokugawa shogunate, and then the Meiji Restoration. So tune in for that if that interests you. And for tomorrow, I'm actually going to pop on with the Prudentialist for a discussion about, funnily enough, Japan and Japanese rearmament in the face of burgeoning China and this whole Russia-Ukraine conflict. So I'll be joining the wonderful Mr. Prudentialist tomorrow, again, if that takes your fancy. And thank you, Settle. It's always nice to sort of pop on for, I usually sort of swan in, 2 or 3 times a year for a stream. So thank you very much, and lovely to join such a wonderful panel of intelligent young men. And until next time, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us. And also, I also, since this is relevant to the topic of the Coomer Right, I linked below a video that Elliot did recently on how to stop masturbating. So masturbators out there, check out that video.
Yeah, so my channel, I mean, everyone here, I'm sure, at least a lot of the people in the channel know that I have a habit of creating lots of new channels. This one is hopefully going to be the end of this trend. I'm going to do everything on here. I'm going to do what I did on Renaissance Man with self-improvement stuff. I'm going to do philosophical stuff, and I'm also going to do political stuff. At the moment, I might do more private content, but at the moment, my focus is on trying to produce good educational content for people wanting to learn Latin. And it really should be all of you, because this is your culture as Western people. But yeah, that's what this is going to be my main channel now. Like the first of the fourth, I think it is, of the main ones. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, sounds great. Thank you everyone again for joining us. Have a good day, and God save the king.
God save